What if every word you read was just a carbon copy? What if ideas were only faint echoes and creativity became reduced to a game of borrowed sparks? What kind of world would that be? What drives someone to lift another's words, intentionally or not? How thin is the line between inspiration and plagiarism? That's our focus for today. From student essays to best-selling novels, from startup pitches to viral posts, we'll navigate the murky waters between originality and imitation. Think of plagiarism as a shapeshifter, moving through classrooms, boardrooms, studios, and digital feeds. What forms does it take? What disguises does it wear? And who gets to decide what counts as truly original? This isn't about finger pointing, it's about asking deeper questions. In an age of infinite information, what does it really mean to create? How do different cultures interpret intellectual ownership? And when does borrowing tip into theft? Today we're digging deeper, challenging assumptions, and exploring the delicate dance of creativity, ethics, and authorship on a global stage. Welcome to Untangle. I am Amadine Ogbewe. Welcome back. Now, I've been joined by an expert, a lawyer, an IP lawyer to be precise, to break down this issue. I'm joined by Damilola Victoria Alabi. She is a full-service legal practitioner, and she's also the coordinator of the Intellectual Property Lawyers Association of Nigeria Clinic. That's the iPlan Clinic. Welcome to the program. It's good to have you.
Thank you, Amadi.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.
All right. So you're involved in all things intellectual property. So let's start with what you would call perhaps a legal definition of plagiarism. And maybe you can also add how it relates to intellectual property, because some people don't even see the works that are being plagiarized as intellectual property.
Okay, so let's take a few steps back. Now, what's plagiarism? So it's simply lifting, copying, taking either parts of someone else's idea, their work, an expression of their idea. Now, emphasis is on without either quoting, acknowledging, or even giving some form of attribution to the person. So that's the line. So it's more like what we call copy and paste. But this time around, you're copying and pasting without acknowledging, without quoting, without referencing, without attributing to the person. More like you're honing it. You're making it look like, yes, these are my words. I'm saying this. Yes, this is from me. Now, where that interplays with intellectual property, especially the genre of intellectual property interplays with its copyright. Now, intellectual property literally means that your intellect, property of your mind, what your mind produces. When you take someone else's work, when you copy and you paste someone else's work, that work is a product of the mind of someone else. That is someone else's intellectual property. Now, for copyright, why I'm saying this particularly ties into copyright is because copyright is that aspect of intellectual property that deals with literary works, writings, all of those kind of things. Now, in most countries, in Nigeria, copyright does not
in the world, or
in most countries,
okay,
and then in Nigeria,
okay,
copyright does not necessarily require a particular means of registering it for it to get protection. So one of the international conventions, the Berne Convention, under the Berne Convention, what it means, or what it says, is that if you create something, it is original to you, and it's in a fixed form, then it enjoys copyright protection automatically. So you don't necessarily have to go take any step further to protect it. But then we have the copyrights registry in Nigeria. We have the Nigerian Copyright Commission. Now, the purpose of having a commission, because you will say, oh, so if I need to protect this, why this commission exists? Yeah. It is to serve as some form of notice. When you take your work to the commission and you go to register it, that way there's a repository, there's a notice to everybody in the world that, okay, this work belongs to this person. So if I'm challenging someone for infringement, I can say, oh, people cannot be like, oh, so how did the person know you are the owner? But then you say, okay, I registered it.
Yeah.
So that's the purpose of that registration, just as a form of notice. But technically speaking, if you come up with something, it is original to you, it's in a fixed form. Two things, originality, fixation. Then it automatically enjoys copyright protection.
Indeed. You've said something that I think would need some clarification.
Okay.
You said when you copy and paste without attribution or, giving the due honor or the due recognition, it implies that you actually don't need permission to, take that copy, but you do need to say you got it from so place, or do you need to first take permission? Because I'm in the mind of an average student who's in their finals, who has to do a project, and they are referencing a work.
So you can imagine how many people you have
exactly.
to.
So
okay, so this is it. For copyrighted works. Now, if that work is copyrighted work, I don't know if you have seen books and you look at the cover page and you say, for copyright, contact this person. They say no part of this book can be copied. This is that they will list all those things photocopied without prior notice of the prior permission of the author. Now, but for, there's an exception for every rule, like we say in law, there's an exception. So the exception to copyright infringement is something there's something called fair use. For instance, if it's a 50-page book and I'm only taking like one sentence or just a line, I mean, that's fair use. It falls under fair use. I don't necessarily need to reach out to the author or to whoever they have designated as the person to take permission from. You understand? Yeah. So that falls under fair use. And then for academic purposes, for instance, the lecturer can use the book to teach in class, that kind of thing, reference the book, mention it, we're students, and then they'll bring books to class and say, okay, go to page, this is that, reading from the words, or even, inferring to it. So fair use, academic use, research purposes, those are exceptions to the need to take permission from the owner of a work. I mean, express permission. But then the flip side to that is that in academic use, that's where plagiarism comes in. Yeah. We're saying that even though you don't have to go the extra mile of seeking permission from the author, at the same time, so there's something called, we have economic rights in IP. This is just a bit. We have economic rights and moral rights. Economic rights means you write the book, you're the owner, you have the right to sell it. The work is yours, it should be in your name, you have the right to that intellectual property, you can even sell it to somebody, you can license it, all of those are right for money. But then you have something called moral rights. Those rights cannot be transferred. One of your moral rights is the right of paternity, that means the right to be named. If I copy from you, if I extracted something, I should be able to say, this is a quote from Nnamdi. In his book, this, that. There's also the moral rights to attribution. And also as an author, even if you have licensed your IP in the work to somebody or even sold it, you still have the moral right to how it is used. If, for instance, you wrote a book and the book is being adapted into a movie, for instance,
yes,
and the content of the movie does not align with your conscience, it's something you find it offensive. Moral rights connects you to the work.
But what if you've already signed a contract?
Yes, but that's why I said you signed off your economic rights.
Okay.
But you have a moral right. That cannot be signed off. You cannot say, because you acquired the rights to use my book, then you can use it to produce a movie that I find unconscionable or that I find, that it's derogatory either to my person or something. So I still have that moral right to say, no, I object to the use of that. So that ties back to that. So even if as a student, you don't have to go out of your way to seek permission from every author whose work you want to use because you are coming under the exception of, it's fair use. But it is very important that you take cognizance of the fact that the author has moral rights to their work. And one of the rights is the right to paternity, the right to be named, to be attributed, to say, this work is from this person who wrote this. I mean, it takes a lot to put out something out there in the public. It's a lot of time and investment.
Indeed. You've mentioned these rights. So I guess the natural question to ask is, what are the consequences for, is it breaking them or depriving people of them? Both the moral right and the economic one. Okay,
so I will start by saying that plagiarism generally is not regarded as an offense. It's not an offense that you say, I'm coming to arrest you, I'm suing you for plagiarism.
It's not a criminal offense.
It's more of a moral and ethical wrong. It is ethics-based. It is based on the fact that this is somebody's work. Somebody owns this. You don't just take it and make it look like it is yours. It is not you. It is not coming from your mind. You know, remember I said something in the beginning, intellectual property, product of our mind. This is not a product of your mind. This is a product of someone else's mind. So now, why you cannot sue someone for saying, oh, you plagiarized my work, but if it is a copyrighted work, you have a civil right to say, okay, you infringed on my copyright, especially if it is going outside the boundaries of fair use. You know, and maybe the person is using it for commercial purpose. For instance, you wrote a book, somebody takes it, maybe strips, remove the back cover, put another back cover, write their name, but the content, I mean, everything is just wholly yours. That's your work. You know, you can, and then in some countries, they might even stretch it to as far as criminal conviction for that. And then it's under the Nigerian Copyright Act, it's so expansive. If you infringe on someone's copyright, I mean, every copies of it in circulation can be confiscated. And then every money you have even recovered from selling it, for instance, you have sold it, the person has the right to get it back from you. So that's the dynamics to it. But then plagiarism, as it were, is more of a moral and ethical wrong. And that's because of what it does to what it does to scholarship. In this sense, what it does to the investments people put into churning out all these research and intellectual works that benefits society, that pushes the frontiers of knowledge. If you're allowed to just take someone's work, I mean, you get discouraged because you feel like, so I don't get mentioned, I don't get recognized for something I invested so much time and energy to come up with. I mean, that's really unfair. So that unfairness is really what plagiarism is about.
Indeed. Maybe we can talk, it's a little bit outside the law now, what people might call the court of public opinion.
Okay.
Or, societal, I call it jury. No, let me not go into words I don't know. But the point I'm making is, there are people who are caught, plagiarizing. They do face other consequences that might not be legal. For instance, if a university finds out that you plagiarized, or even your peers finding out that someone you regarded in this field copied the work.
Like reputational damage.
Yes. Those are things that can, accrue as consequences.
Yes. Okay, so for academics, most academic institutions now have what is like a plagiarism framework to say you submit your work, we're going to run it through an anti-plagiarism system, and if it's found you plagiarized this sort of thing, you'll be penalized. For some of them, it's that your work is going to be rejected, it's going to be brought down. Even if it's been published already, they'll bring it down. For instance, with the project, your supervisor can say, no, we're not accepting this. Those are kind of to say, those are penalties for what you have done. To say, we are not going to allow you to get away with this. You understand that? Yeah. So schools, I mean, and increasingly nowadays, most institutions even now have softwares. They have programs in place that even if you're submitting a soft copy of the work, they run it through, and then it tells them, you'll see some work, they'll say 70% plagiarism, 60%. So it keeps grading and it keeps checking to see how much. It goes as far as even the way your citation, even the way, because, we have standards for writing citations in academic writings. So the way your references are cited and all of those things, there has to be strict compliance. Yeah. So, and that's why some of these, if you're submitting papers, for instance, for publication in journals, they'll give you terms. You have to comply with this, you have to comply with this. And one of the things they try to say is that your work should be original. Now, saying your work should be original is not saying, don't reference anybody, everything must come straight from your head. It is to say, even if you're referencing somebody, you have to give the person attribution in the work.
Indeed.
So, yeah.
Fair enough. We've even had people who've had to resign from very prominent jobs after being embroiled in all of these scandals. Others have lost their jobs. I'm just saying this to really educate the public to know, because when people feel as though the consequences are not really outlined, they might say, who's going to stop me? But when it comes to academics and, that's consequence will always come.
And I must add that, I'm sorry to interject.
Yeah, go ahead.
That if you think that it's okay to plagiarize and there are no consequences, what you're doing is you're killing knowledge, society thrives on innovation, on creativity. As humans, we have the innate ability to create, but when it stifles creativity, if we allow plagiarism to just keep going unchecked, it doesn't encourage people to create. And the process of creation is strenuous. So if somebody pulls themselves through that strain and comes out with something, and we allow somebody else to take portions of it without at least, the barest minimum, mentioning the person and saying this is from this person. In time, it will put a very big dent in the body of knowledge that we have in circulation, and that is going to stagnate the growth of society one way or the other.
Indeed. Thank you so much for putting it so well. I will go on a break now, and when we return, we'll delve into other aspects of plagiarism, particularly the advent of technology, talking about artificial intelligence. What does it mean for this issue? We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Culture connects us beyond borders. It's a bridge between traditions, creativity, and the future.
Culture is alive, shaping identities and communities every day.
Art tells stories of resilience and vision.
Artists blend tradition with innovation.
Cultural preservation creates sustainability and empowerment.
Culture evolves and adapts.
Music and dance unites communities through movement.
And right here, in the heart of our cities, artists and creators are keeping these cultures alive.
On Culture Cove, let's explore,
celebrate,
and preserve the arts and culture that define us.
Welcome back. I'm still here with Damilola. She is an IP lawyer breaking down plagiarism. Damilola, let's move straight to artificial intelligence. It's a big issue now.
Yes.
And maybe I should give a little background. What we see, they call them large language models or learning models and all of that, where it's fed a lot of content, and so that it can mimic how basically how humans behave. And we've even had some popular cases. Take, for instance, the author of A Song of Ice and Fire, talking about George R.R. Martin, having to sue after some persons, because he hasn't released a book for close to 7-8 years, and everybody's anticipating. So some person took it into their hands to ask an AI to, taking a look at all the works he has done, give us the next book. And then he has basically, that battle is ongoing. So where does the line come in here? We understood plagiarism in the time of papers and writing, but now we're having this new dimension with technology and artificial intelligence. How does the law or how does legal frameworks adapt to suit these new challenges?
Well, interesting question. Now, the funny thing is, because for the most part, law is kind of playing catch up when it comes to technology. And that's because technology is always moving so fast.
Yes.
Before you know it, a new model is out, and then the process of passing a law is a long one. So before you finish passing one, there's an advancement already. I'm like, so we have to review the law again. Now, the basic thing is this: in most jurisdictions, there are no specific codifications to say, okay, this is how AI and creativity or IP should interplay. But then, for most of these, it's been challenging. I think that's one thing I will say, and that's because generative AI depends on being fed. Just keep bombarding it with data. And then so that it has this large database from which, when you prompt, it can draw from and bring out something for you. Now, there's been a series of, for instance, there was a time when, I think it was in the US, a lawyer was, there's this thing you file in court called written address at the end of your file paper. And then apparently it was AI generated, and AI, came up with some cases that were not exactly cases that did not exist. And the judge found out. I was like, okay, so the lawyer got sanctioned for that. So that's just one of those things. It's called hallucination. People say, hey, I hallucinate. It brings up things that are not there. But then what happens when it is bringing up things that are there, but not with the permission of the owners of the things that are there? Now, for most technological companies, if you say, okay, now do we say for every work you want to put or you want to add to your database, you have to seek permission? Now, personally, I don't think it falls within the realm of fair use because, for instance, there's commerce involved. Let's take ChatGPT, for instance. There's a free version and then there's the paid version of it. Somebody's making money from it somewhere, but that's data from someone else's work that is being mined. Some jurisdictions are trying to come up with laws on how to guide and guard and say, okay, you need to come up with terms of use for using works that are part of your database for your AI for most of these tech companies. Now we're still coming. Most countries are still trying to come up with that. Well, in Nigeria, we don't have that yet. At least I can say that. Some countries it's still in the works. In most countries generally, and that's because nowadays it doesn't take anything. I just give a prompt, it can generate an image. I don't need a photographer. I mean, people now generate professional headshots using AI. And and then even books, like you said, the story of the book, research works. Without somebody having conducted any research, you just come up with a very nice research, giving you percentage and data and everything. I wonder, oh wow, fantastic. But the person has not done anything. So it has drawn from what other people have done that have been uploaded. So it's becoming a case of consent. Seeking consent of the owners of this work is becoming really important. But then it becomes a question of how practicable is it? We're talking of millions and millions of data being fed to these things. Now, how many people do we want to track and ask for? For instance, there was a case in the United States. It's not exactly AI, but it was a database of books. Authors Guild and Trust. For these people, they created it was like an international library, and then they had this repository of books. There were you can search on them and just have like an index of all these books. The goal for it was, first of all, for ease of access for people, and then secondly, for people who had visual impairment, who could not really access physical books. At least that way they could access books that are screen readable. And the Authors Guild sued Trust for it. Now, at the end of the day, it was a very long case that dragged on for so long. But at the end of the day, the court found that it was fair use. It was fair use. Now, some of the works that were on the database were works that were copyrighted. But the court found that it was fair use. It was fair use because basically it was to give people more like access to these books. Not like you reading through, every word of the book, that kind of thing, but you know that, okay, on psychology, you can find this book and this author and this author and that kind of thing. And the fact that it was also a way for people who could normally not have access to physical copies of books because of disabilities. At least they could have access to a repository. Now, I know there was a time on ChatGPT when if you generate a prompt, it will give you footnotes to tell you this is taken from this. I think that's an improvement. I think they are beginning to probably take the cue to say, okay, this thing came from this person, we're referencing it. So if you click on those, it's always one small bracket with numbers in it, like footnotes. And then you click on it, it will lead you to a link where that was taken from. So that's some improvement, but then there's still a lot more to be done. Because, like you said, in the age of paper, if you copy someone's work, we know, okay, you took it from here. But nowadays, you're talking of millions of data in one place, in one system, people accessing it and just drawing from it like that. A lot of work still needs to be done. And the law catching up with it is still a struggle because of how fast-paced technology grows. But hopefully, there are countries that have laws in the works already to address issues of intellectual property theft using AI. That's because, like I say again, we don't want technology to eventually discourage creativity in the end. Because technology should also be like an offshoot of creativity, not stifling it.
Indeed. You've already broken down a lot the consequences of what plagiarism can lead to. One might wonder, as the original creator, someone who has intellectual property, are there things you can do to protect yourself from plagiarism? Is that within your control in any way?
Okay, you mean to protect your work from being plagiarized?
Plagiarized, yes.
Okay, as the original author of a work, I think the best you can do is have it copyrighted. So that at least when, any form of infringement, at least you have a way to exercise some form of right. But then thankfully, most educational institutions now have anti-plagiarism systems in place. So I am sure that for most schools, when you submit works and they run it through this, they flag it. So while you're not exactly, getting some money or something from that, at least it forces people to realize that is the consciousness, is this, how do I say it? Is this the need to promote respect for the product of the minds of people. They need to know that it's not just flowing like water. This it took time. It's a lot of time and investment and energy. So let's give some respect to the person who did this. So and that's really what it is. So apart from the fact that you copyright, if it's infringed upon, and the interesting thing about IP is that nobody is going to protect your IP for you. For instance, you copyright your work. Nobody is helping you to look after it. Is your burden. You're the owner of the work. So you still have the burden to be like your vigilante, watching out for, okay. But then the question is, how much can you watch?
Yeah.
For instance, I write a book and then someone takes it outside Nigeria and that's where, plagiarism is happening and that stuff of thing. How much of a surveillance can you mount on your IP work? That's where the help that the educational institutions are providing, at least within the confines of academics, is very important. That at least some of them have very strict sanctions in place. That as a student, your work is found to be, you're found to be guilty of plagiarism. It has very serious consequences. And for me, that is deterrence. At least people know that this action is not unpunishable.
Indeed.
Yes.
So are there any major misconceptions you think people have about plagiarism?
I think we already spoke about it. So the conception is people think that it's just copy and paste. People think it's an harmless offense. Nobody's being hurt. At least I'm not hurting anybody. But it is not. It is not exactly harmless. It goes to the root of our growth as a society. It goes to the root of our development as a people. And it goes to the root of our respect for each other. I mean, you do something, we're having a conversation earlier, we say, lawyers, they are very proud about it. I'm like, everybody should be proud about what they do. There's dignity in labor. Creating something is a labor. So that respect is not a victimless offense. Plagiarism is not a victimless offense. You're literally hurting somebody. Yes, the person might not be there in person, but you're hurting the ability of somebody who has created and somebody who intends to create. So that's it.
All right, what about the conception that plagiarism is limited to written works or perhaps only academic works?
No, not really. I mean, with the age of internet, plagiarism and I even stretched as far as data, algorithms, because nowadays people copy almost everything and anything copyable can now be copied. So it stretches as far as people copying data, algorithms,
codes.
In fact, you could even self-plagiarize.
Can you break that down, please?
So you have written a work before and you're writing a new work and you want to make reference to it. You shouldn't just take from your previous work, even though you had the author. You should be able to, I don't know if you've, when I was a school, I used to like to attend inaugural lectures. So you see the referencing and you see the person speaking, referencing themselves. Like, okay, this research, something, 1990 something, to show that I did this work at this time and I'm referencing it in the present work. So if you are doing something now, if you're writing a work, if you have a work now, and it contains maybe ideas or parts of a previous work you've done, I mean, self-respect, at least make mention to the fact that I did this at this time, and this is the result of it. So it's also part of, the culture, the consciousness of the fact that for everything we put out from our mind, we should give it enough respect.
Indeed. I think people should really be careful there so they don't end up cheating their own selves or having to take themselves to court. You didn't reference me, but you are me.
No, that's extreme.
Indeed. Yeah. But anyway, thank you so much for breaking it down. I believe people across different fields now, both students, people in academia, even creators will take note of this and be sure to, at the very least, check more about attribution and giving credit where it's due. Thank you so much for coming and for breaking it down.
You're welcome.
All right. So that's how we end the program for today. See you next time on Untangle. We come to you every Monday by 10 a.m. Bye for now. I am Amadine Ubewe.